Hey guys, Eric Smith here, Five Reasons Sports contributor, also co host of Scouting the Fins that you can find on the Five Reasons YouTube and also 3 yards per carry feed. We are back again with a recap of the second of three OTAs this week for the Miami Dolphins. And let's start with some notes from the Mike McDaniel press conference. He was asked about the orange jersey for today and said that there were lots of players eligible. He did say that, particularly Bradley Chubb at the end of practice was one who, earned some consideration. One of the questions was on the three new starters on the offensive line and about the ease of transition. And Mike said about phase 1 and 2 of the offseason program being monumental if they want to paint the picture of reps that are against what those offensive linemen have done and, get them to move and operate in the same way. Asked about the safety performance, Mike said the entire group is starting to put their mark on the team. That modern NFL defenses with the two shell safeties and the way you can move them around requires a lot of communication with the safeties. He talked about Ife Melifonwu and Ashton Davis, saying they've led the charge in understanding what's being asked and putting together meaningful reps. And he also noted that the competition at safety is as heavy as any position on the team. Mike was asked about Tyreek Hill catching passes. He said that Tyreek is trying to shortchange the process of when he's supposed to be catching footballs, and that Tyreek has been active in the offseason program while not catching footballs. And also said that Tyreek is towing the line in a healthy, good way of pushing that timetable. James Daniels was asked about. Mike said that, Daniels has understood what his opportunity here is in Miami and how much they're counting on him while he's recovering from that injury. I said he can't just go through the motions, and that he had a great day on the field yesterday in individual drills. And that was the first time that Mike could see what he did on the field versus just talking to him in the meeting rooms. He said that it wasn't a perfect performance by James Daniels' measure, but you can see what he's working on and being very intentional, from doing it in a different way than what he did in Pittsburgh. The question was asked about, the logic behind which side the guards play on. And Mike said, you start with seeing if there is a motivating reason for which side to put those guards. Do they have a strength in their, hands or their feet or their body mechanics for one side versus the other? And then, after that is when you get into the different things from a coaching perspective, and he put the example out there of the, maybe the left side has to have more of a rangier guard or vice versa. For James Daniels particular, he said that, he's very capable of doing either. But when you have a rookie like Jonah, you need to settle down the rotation and, let the movement get to where you can get a realistic evaluation relative to everyone. You want to get to the point that you can allow football players to play football. And, so the idea there is that, talking about Jonah and whether one position versus multiple, right? You want to wait until he's comfortable and then you can rotate more. And then, you really want to, once everything is equal, you want to look for a reason to keep someone in one place. Otherwise, it's better to have them, be versatile. Quinn Ewers was another player that was asked about. Mike said there, there's a cool combination of Tua's experience in the system, along with Zach Wilson and Quinn Ewers being newer. He said that this offense in Miami is different because they ask linemen to run a bit more, and they also ask the quarterbacks to throw the ball earlier and with anticipation. Said that Zach and Quinn have been finding a new way to play aggressive within this system each day. And he said, you want to be aggressive to the primary and aggressive through the reads, and that Quinn Ewers has had command and taken steps every day that he's been here. There was a question about Jalen Phillips and whether his recovery is more physical or mental, talking about both his return from injury and the his current contract situation. Mike said that you have to focus on intentionality, and what you're putting your focus on is what you will get results out of. He said that Jalen Phillips is the appropriate player for that challenge, and used a common phrase of Mike McDaniel saying control the controllables. Next up was Kenneth Grant, and Mike said that early on he got the respect of veteran teammates by the little things he does, like understanding his role in the team. Said that KG came in with a vet like understanding of needing to be 100% on what he's asked to do when it comes to technique and fundamentals. He said there's been some ebbs and flows with the performance, like every rookie, but that Grant has won early in play production with technique and fundamentals, and then has shown the strain and grit to make plays late in the play as well. Nick Westbrook Akine, Mike said that he's a dog. He's a competitor that brings it every day. He talked about his mental fortitude working with the new team and managing stuff where he wasn't on the field every day, due to some injuries. He said it was obvious to everyone around that he's locked in. Said that NWI utilizes mistakes made from others when he's not on the field to make improvements when he gets back on the field. And he also mentioned NWI's growth at the line of scrimmage game being super encouraging. Next up was a question about Tyreek and the upcoming Noah Lyles race. I guess that Tyreek is running a race on Friday in preparation, and Mike said that the stipulations that he has on that is that Thursday, the day before that race, Tyreek will be practicing football drills and that he will be doing the same today. And if he wants to go run in a straight line against someone and utilize football training, sweet. He confirmed that Tyreek is not training for track, and he wished him good luck. Said he doesn't even know who he's racing, but that he's sure he's fast. Mike won't care whether Tyreek wins or loses. And then, he ended that saying, good news is they are locked into Dolphins football, and the focus is on today's practice. Next up, there was a question about the, culture change and shift that was brought up by a couple of people yesterday during media availabilities. And Mike said that things have been collectively established as non negotiables to improve upon from one season to another, and that it's been communicated in a very direct way. And it's not Mike wasn't surprised that the question was asked because Mike had a team meeting just before yesterday's media availabilities talking about, that culture change and shift. Said that you can't run away from things that need to be fixed. If it's going to be something that's in the gray area, they need to be adept at what that's going to look like and hold the players accountable. And he said that, ultimately cultures are a collection of people and each person has a role in the culture. For, Mike, he's more interested in doing versus saying stuff. And that the off season has been pointed at exactly what we're looking for and knowing who can and can't be counted on. And there was a follow up question about those non negotiables. And Mike said, football, the football program has to focus on football. A lot of things that, can't dominate people's time, can't be the stuff outside of football. You've got to be on time and accountable to each other following those rules. You have to feel open as a team to call someone out when it's needed. And the flip side of that is that you have to be okay being called out when it's needed. Said that, they're in the business of winning football games and that they need to they have established a standard and they want to maintain that vision, that they've had from the beginning, but sometimes you have to refocus that a little bit. And then the final question from Mike McDaniel's media availability was again about the decrease of explosives and the spacing. And he was asked what is the reason that the run game was not as effective in 23. And Mike McDaniel, you know, said that they've discussed some of the primary point of attack blockers, not being available, and that, kind of put them behind the eight ball when some of them were lost in 24 versus what they were looking at in 23. And that you have to start with the expectation of the desired result. You need to have connectivity to the quarterback, to the track of the ball carrier, all the way to the blockers. And you have to, attack some of the ways that they're being defended schematically. Another Mike McDaniel, common quote that you have to focus on technique and fundamentals. And he, talked about the offense as a entirety, doing better understanding not only their responsibility, but how they work in conjunction with the others around them. And that wraps up the notes from the Mike McDaniel press conference this morning. All right, let's move on to the practice portion of today's mandatory OTA. And like I said yesterday, I'm not boots on the ground in Miami, so my information is coming from a combination of beat reporters that are in attendance, including Alan Poupart, Hal Habib, David Furones, and Barry Jackson. So James Daniels did join the team on the field, but was not doing any work. Tyreek Hill was catching passes on the sideline, but didn't participate in any drills. Zach Sealer once again was present, and he was working, doing individual drills, but nothing as far as team drills. Taz Washington was the only non-quarterback in the red jersey, indicating injury, non-contact. Austin Jackson was present today, but also was not working. Orange jersey went to Bradley Chubb, and that's not really a surprise if you caught McDaniel's hint from his press conference about the player working on it since December of 2023 when Chubb was originally injured. Sounds like there was a emphasis on deep shots today, with some of them connecting and others not, to a variety of receivers and from a variety of quarterbacks. Ife Melifonwu had the first interception of Tua in these OTAs. It was a pass to Nick Westbrook Akine that appeared to be a miscommunication. Willie Gay Jr. had a would-be sack and then picked off Zach Wilson on consecutive plays. He was also Travis Wingfield's standout performer of the day. Wingfield also noted his tight pass coverage. Dante Trader Jr. also had a would-be sack and another near interception after getting one yesterday when he was jumping a Zach Wilson pass. He ended up tipping it into Taj Washington's hands. Cameron Good was also noted with a would-be sack. Matt Dickerson had a rep where he beat Patrick Paul for a would-be sack, but Paul would have been called for holding had it been a real game. I did find it interesting that I think this rep by Patrick Paul was the only rep where an offensive lineman was, called out by name either in a good way or bad way on the day. Grayson Murphy, again, making an impact. Had multiple times that he was, noted as making plays in the run game, but he did finish practice going to the ground and grabbing his side after getting tangled up with an offensive lineman. Barry Jackson reported that the practice ended with a wet ball drill for the rookies with Aaron Brewer holding the hose. And then Joe Shad said the day ended with players hooting and hollering while diving on a slip and slide and recovering loose footballs. I think that, based on Murphy wrapping up the day with a apparent injury and then, them letting the players kind of let loose on that slip and slide, I would not be surprised if the players get released a day early. All right, we're going to wrap it up with the player media availabilities after practice. And as of the time of this recording, the videos are not on the Dolphins YouTube channel. So we're going to hit on some highlights that, again, were shared by the beat reporters. So they talked to Zach Wilson, and he said he treats practice interceptions as learning experiences. Says he threw one yesterday because a receiver ran a route flatter than he expected, and he ripped it with conviction. He also talked about how he's using these practices in terms of, did I throw with intent? Did I see space and let it rip? And was it the wrong decision? and then apply it and learn from the next one. I think that's been kind of a common theme that, Mike McDaniel has talked about, the process more than the results. So I think that's a key part when we're looking at these interceptions and things like that. That it's all part of the experience and part of the development, and wouldn't look too much into it. Especially in an OTA at this time of the year. Nick Westbrook Akine also talked to the media, said it's a cool opportunity to be part of something special. Said he's trying to find his role. Said there's been a few times that bad habits that he's had have showed up. Again, another Mike McDaniel press conference point where he was talking about the new guys that have come in, especially about trying to get them to do things the way the Dolphins expect them to do it. And then Westbrook Akine also, reiterated from McDaniel's press conference that he's been working through an injury, but now feels ready to push himself. Also talked to Bradley Chubb, and he said that he is totally out of rehab mode and he doesn't think about his knee anymore. In regards to the culture change talk being the same as in the past, Chubb actually said that in the past they were lying about it, that they would say it and they wouldn't really act on it, and that now the actions accompany the words. And he said that Mike McDaniel hasn't really changed, but the buy in around him has changed and the players have taken accountability. And then Jalen Phillips talked as well. Somebody asked him about his contract, and he just said, he's trying to stay focused, trying to stay present. Again, something that came out of the Mike McDaniel press conference as well about, what you're focused on is what you're going to see the results with. Phillips said that he is healthy and that he feels like he could play right now, and also noted that the ACL recovery has actually been way easier than the Achilles recovery. And then the last one I believe they talked to was James Daniels. And the only note that I could find on this one, even though I'd be really interested to hear what Daniels had to say, was just that he had some really good things to say about Chop Robinson. So that's going to wrap up our notes on day 2 of mandatory OTAs. Like I said before, wouldn't be surprised. It's not uncommon for them to cut off the last day of these OTAs and let the players leave early. They get a little bit of a break after this. So I wouldn't be surprised if this is the last day of OTAs. And if it's not, then we'll, talk again tomorrow about it. But appreciate you guys watching, and we'll talk again soon.